How does one learn to start healing? This is the question that Trails tackles throughout the many storylines the series goes through. I will be discussing 7 characters in total who turn their sacrificial natures into becoming better for themselves or for others. I will be going from each arc, starting from Sky, so if you haven't caught up fully to the Trails series, be wary, but I will have chapters to separate each arc in case you want to watch the parts you've completed. I hope you enjoy listening to my rambles.
ところであんた、なんか忘れてることない？名前よ、名前。私もさっき言ったでしょ？こっちだけが知らないのって悔しいし、不公平じゃない。
ま、道理だな。今さら隠しても仕方あるまい。不便だし、聞かせてもらおうか。
わかりました。僕は。
Joshua Astray. The Moon to Estelle's Sun is the secondary protagonist we're greeted with from FC to SC. He doesn't typically exhibit the traits of a self-sacrificial nature until the end of FC, leading into SC when we're shown the truth that Wiseman was hiding from us all this time. The fact that Joshua's happy life with Estelle and being a Bright was nothing more than a lie, that he wasn't ever truly in control, and that he was just a tool to bring information for Ouroboros to successfully evade dealing with Cassius Bright. The truth burned him, and set Joshua on a journey that could practically be considered death. To take down Ouroboros for all that's happened, causing him to have to leave Estelle behind as he chases his goal.
出会った時から君のことが大好きだったよ。さよなら、エステル。
Joshua sacrifices his very emotions, his relationships, and memories in order to sink Ouroboros himself. Sky SC critiques Joshua's way of thinking when working in parallel to Estelle's own journey of bringing him back. In Joshua's side of the story, he's usually keeping people at arm's length, referring to them and himself as tools to not let himself gain a close attachment to anyone else ever since the tragedy of Hamel occurred. At this time of the game, he is exactly how Wiseman wanted him to be, even if he's against him. Joshua is nothing more than a lifeless tool that sole purpose is his goal. Nothing more, nothing less. And the worst thing about it is that he's fine with it. He's okay telling himself that this is who he is, which is why it's perfect that it's Estelle who's the one to make him see the truth and allow him to open up once again.
そっか。見ないであげるから、そのまま泣いちゃうといいよ。こうして私が抱きしめててあげるから。
Estelle, in her own journey, has cemented her motivations and experience as a bracer for this moment, but she didn't do it alone. In fact, she did the opposite. With the help of her friends and allies, she was able to overcome any path in her way because she knew it wasn't a single person's job to solve things nor sacrifice themselves for others. She understands that we're all human, regardless of how we see ourselves. Imparting this knowledge onto Joshua, he breaks down crying, not because of this or that, but because Estelle gives him a reason to give himself a break, to take a moment and let his emotions flow through. Burning away the emotionless, self-sacrificial doll, Estelle brings Joshua back from the brink by simply understanding him more than he does himself, teaching him the strength that others give him and that he deserves more than just to fight on his own. It's just as Joshua says.
人は人の間にある限りただ無力なだけの存在じゃない。
少しお休みになった方がいいかと思います。
キュルルってお前全然変わってへんやん。相変わらずいつも腹ペコなんやな。
Kevin Graham is a character we're introduced to as an easygoing and mindful person throughout SC. However, Skythird paints a different picture, allowing us to peer into his self-hate and self-sacrificial nature as a way to atone for every tragedy that happened in his life. His mother, after being weakened and oppressed from their father leaving, attempts to murder him, leading to his escape away from her, only to come back to be greeted with her own suicide. That guilt he feels is further supplemented by the pain and self-hate he feels after being the cause of the next person who came to care for him, Rufina Argent. Perhaps this doesn't fit the bill for self-sacrifice too well, but it's ultimately his self-hate that blurs the line between being selfless to take so many missions after and being selfish by ignoring Rias for years and wishing for his own death.
分かった。そう取り計らおう。
なあ、回すんならなるべくハードなのを頼みます。おっと、それからあだ名でしたっけ。せやな。下法狩り、そんな感じでいくとしますわ。
It is only through Rias attempting to sacrifice herself for Kevin for him to realize and forgive himself for his past mistakes, to look past the clouds of his angers at himself and to view Rufina as she should have been. Sky Third depicts his overworking and self-sacrificial nature as self-destructive and uses another case of self-sacrifice to break him out of that rut. The only difference being is that it's someone doing so out of genuine care for him, to be that person who's there for him, which gives him the strength to be there for himself as well.
リス、大丈夫や。いつの日か俺たちもたどり着けるはずや。姉さんが夢見てたどり着こうとしてた場所に。多分姉さんはそこに先に向かっただけのことや。だからきっとまた会えるやろ。この声、
まさか
キア。
よかった。ライダもエリーもティアもランディも無事で。
KeA Bannings is the adopted daughter of the SSS, the Zero child that holds the power of the Septarian in her hands at the time of the Crossbell arc. She's a character that may not have been expected when talking about self-sacrificial characters in Trails, yet she fits that ideal perfectly with her guilt and immense power as a Septarian herself. In Azure, we learned that the SSS were unable to defeat the DG cult back in Zero, dying in the process of their final battle without KeA. This moment is the spiraling point that gives fuel to KeA's idea that she has to be the one to protect everyone, given her kind nature. Her self-sacrificial tendencies are also attributed towards the family she surrounds herself with. From the IBC raid all the way throughout Azure, KeA is placed in scenarios with the SSS fighting to protect everyone in Crossbell without regard to themselves at times. She takes inspiration from her adopted father, Lloyd, and his own selflessness and takes it into a negative extreme. Believing that she must use her power out of selflessness, she willingly sacrifices her happiness in order to allow Crossbell to be freed of foreign powers.
ごめんね。今までありがとう。大好きだよ、みんな。
It is only from Lloyd and the SSS that she's able to break free of the idea that she must go at it alone, because the SSS don't fight alone, nor are they just one person leading the charge. They're family, and by showing KeA that no matter what hard times come, that they'll fight together to beat the odds, because it's not about taking the easy way out, it's about taking the right way that helps everyone, not one for all, nor all for one, but simply family for family.
同じベッドで寝て寝坊したこと、エリーと一緒に本を読んだり、みんなの洗濯物を屋上に干したこと、ティオと一緒に掃除をしたり、ミッシーの限定グッズを買ったこと、ランディと一緒にポーカーをしたり、露店街に買い出しに行ったこと、課長と洗い物をしたり、サイトたちと昼寝をしたこと、それが嘘だったなんて本当にキーヤは思うのか？
Alright, watch closely.
might be a bit unexpected to choose Crow to represent sacrifice, but I believe he represents the idea in a multitude of ways. Crow Armbrust, the grandson of the mayor of Jirai, to put it blunt, has essentially sacrificed his entire life, his happiness, his connections, everything, all to chase his goal to kill Osborne. And he does. He succeeds in his goal at the end of CS1, which sparks the end of his own self-worth too. This works perfectly along with Cold Steel's main character, Rean Schwarzer, as well. Crow might hold a strong facade, but throughout the games, he keeps an internalized belief that his only need to be there is to fulfill his goal at any given moment. Whether that be Osborne or stopping the Great Twilight in CS4, he's known for his wisecracking exterior, but deep down, he believes he doesn't really deserve another chance after staking his whole life on his goals, nor does he believe that it would happen until CS4's true ending.
But how? I was fading away. I felt it. And my hair too. My body feels whole again.
Crow is a bit of a special case for how he gets out of this belief and need to sacrifice himself for what he's aiming towards. His grandfather was a person who earnestly cared for and wished for the best towards Jirai, yet that eventually killed him in the end. Seeing that, Crow puts up his usual face of being a slacker, being someone that's not genuine towards how he really feels, such as how he details his time in Thor's being only for the sole purpose of leading him to killing Osborne. Crow talks as though he's someone aimless, without a goal now in sight, and that his life has nothing else anymore. Yet he still tries to hide his true feelings behind a joking facade that Rean clearly sees through, being someone who understands very well how Crow truly feels and wishes to save him from it, like how Class 7 helped him. The sad part is, CS2 does not end on Crow getting a good ending, but exactly what he thought he deserved. He sacrifices himself for Rean, and essentially without knowing, plays himself into the hands of Osborne and his plan.
But in the end, he couldn't avenge his grandfather. He didn't get revenge on you. Was everything he did, was his whole life for nothing?
Once CS3 occurs, Crow comes back, not as himself, but as a literal representation of himself trying to avoid the truth of himself. His facade becomes real as he's resurrected from the dead. It takes a while, but his sense of self does return eventually once discarding the mask. Similar to Rean in CS4, once he joins Class 7 once again, he's again given a goal to work towards, this time with his friends after Rean asserts that he's needed more than just for a means to an end, but as someone to care for. However, this doesn't change his internalized beliefs that this is all he's worth for. He was ready to die once again when his so-called job was over. It is only when the opportunity is shoved in his face that he's willing to take his second chance, a second chance at a life where he isn't puppeteered by any higher powers, a fate that he gets to choose. Crow overcomes his sacrificial tendencies from his appreciation after his own death. Now, he lives not for his goals nor for any other reason, but simply for himself, to make up that lost time he rightfully deserves with the freedom he now has.
It's too old for journeys of self-discovery, to be honest. But I wouldn't even be here now if not for Ordine and the rest. It makes me want to find meaning in my life, you know?
Almost there. Man, spring's really in full bloom here, huh? Back home, there was still so much snow on the ground, I hardly even realized it.
Rean Schwarzer is definitely the biggest example of sacrifice in all of Trails. The self-hating adopted son of the Schwarzer family, Rean is a character that is used to putting himself down, discounting his efforts, and wondering if he truly deserves kindness. This is all flipped on his head once he enters Class 7 and starts befriending his classmates and fellow students in Thor's. This all being mainly in thanks to a certain teacher giving him the advice he needed in order to set his footing somewhere instead of vanishing in the wind.
It seems like you're desperately trying to find something. But if you don't plant yourself somewhere, you're just gonna blow away with the next big gust that comes along. And on that note, make sure you're back in the dorm by curfew and all transgressions will be forgiven. Toodles!
If I don't plant myself somewhere, huh? She may have a few screws loose, but she's got a point. Maybe I should just try going with the flow and see what comes of it.
Understanding Rean's worries, his instructor, Sarah Valestein, knew to put him as the middle ground of Class 7 due to his unique nature between the divide of commoners versus nobles. From here, Rean was able to help Class 7 understand one another and inspire them with his own growth to benefit their own. eventually all ending up into a family. The same could be said about his time as an instructor himself too in CS3 onwards. Similar to how Sarah helped him at the start, he would also help cultivate his students into becoming the best versions of themselves and becoming a family of their own too. However, the biggest point I want to illustrate is that through the Trail series, by taking a character already low in self-esteem towards themselves, and like other protags, giving him a family that gives him strength, it would only come naturally that Rean would associate those two things into becoming the very foundation of his self-sacrificial nature.
That's right. How can I forget? All these people I cherish.
Unlike the other characters I talked about earlier, Rean's story is not about family or someone else helping you free yourself from your negative perceptions towards yourself, and while others still do play a part in it, Rean's story is about a boy learning that at the end of the day, he deserves to be happy himself too. His sacrificial tendencies were highlighted especially in CS4's bad ending, with him sacrificing himself. This point became an important part of Reverie's storyline for him as well. After confronting his possible future, an amalgamation of his self-sacrificial beliefs in the form of Ishmael Rean, he's forced to truly reflect upon how his actions could have been and to focus on the future instead of the present towards it. He learns that while his friends could be safe, that he would still be hurting them by sacrificing himself for them, because they do care for him. Those beliefs he held from all those years ago about wondering if they're being kind to him only for courtesy are no longer true anymore. He's finally given people who truly care for him, and he has to accept that he cannot act the same anymore. For them, but most importantly, he must be happy with himself so that everyone can be happy. After all, everyone includes him too.
If I want the people I love to be happy, then I need to be happy too. So that's my goal right now. And that means I'm through with shouldering the burden alone. From this day forward, I'm going to trust my loved ones. Even the ones I have yet to meet. If we find ourselves up against the same great evil again, then I'm sure we can find a solution that will let all of us continue being happy together.
I go by C. I am the leader of the Reborn Imperial Liberation Front.
C is an interesting character to talk about, considering he was built up over the Cold Steel arc as a main antagonist against Class 7. While we may know the events, we only learn of C's side of the story during his root and his internalized issues towards his identity that he kept deep down as he lived. C, otherwise known as Rufus Alberea, is a character that borders not in black or white, but in gray for Reverie. As he says himself, he's a person that used anything and everything to advance his own interests. Selfish to his core, a person that truly lived for himself. Without context, Rufus would be the exact opposite of the idea of sacrifice. At least, up until a certain young girl helped him find solace at who he was.
Where you're from or how you were raised. I don't see what you've done or haven't done, what you possess or what you lack, because none of those are what make you exist as a person. So it can't be that you suddenly don't exist just because someone decides to reject those parts of you.
That's quite a philosophical approach to the matter. Or perhaps that objective thinking is the most one of artificial intelligence can fathom.
I don't know. How could I know? Just to me, being is what makes a human a human.
Perhaps you're right.
And so, it's what makes you, you.
Perhaps you're right.
His companion, Lapis Rosenberg, helps ease his years-long issue towards his own self-worth and identity. At first, he directed his problems towards achieving a goal, whether that be surpassing his father or becoming something of worth to himself. With all his problems laid out to bear, Lapis helps him find satisfaction with himself, that regardless of achievements, goals, or shortcomings, that none of that in the end matters towards his reason of living. He lives because he is who he is. This perspective, along with a group of kids, all naive but all living in a gray area as well, gives him the family he wanted all this time, people that can genuinely understand and he can relate to. His feelings, along with everything he's done in the past, build up into his eventual sacrificial plan he undertakes in the end of the game.
Huh?
So, humanity will be the one to bring punishment upon itself. Not quite the ending I predicted. I suppose it's karma at its finest.
This moment in particular is Rufus romanticizing his sacrificial plan at the end, an ending that he himself never would have expected to come for him, but also one that he didn't expect would make him feel so fulfilled. Yet, even as he tries, his new allies, particularly the Imperial Picnic Squad, come to save him just as he's ready to meet his end. Similar to the other characters in this video, Rufus's sacrificial plan comes at the thought of those he cares about this time around. His lack of self-worth at achieving nothing in his own eyes, along with his past actions, culminate in his plan to die for everything. But a plan like that wouldn't have ever been possible, because unlike before, Rufus has people who care for him, not for any achievement or etc., but because they want Rufus for who he is. A strange one, but a family nonetheless that cares simply for Rufus Albarrea.
That I had what I wanted this whole time.
Pardon?
The name's Van. Van Arkride. Don't got a clue how you found out about me. But if you know the 4SPG code, you gotta know what work I do here, right?
The most recent protagonist for Trails, Van Arkride, is another addition to characters that are affected by the idea of sacrifice. He's a somewhat jaded, self-isolated man who mentors his part-timers at Arkride Solutions in order for them not to go down the same route as he once did. The difference in comparison to other protagonists is that while Van doesn't exhibit the same youthful charm or speech-giving to the same extent as them, he instead has lived through that same process and is now using that to benefit his part-timers to living lives better than his.
The world of work is. Good thing you're still in school, because you got a lot to learn.
Maybe, but still.
Van is a character that's lived through the ups and downs of life. He uses his experiences to understand his team and gives them someone who will nurture their growth. He protects them from the darkness of the world, but also brings them away from the light to ground themselves. However, Van is also a character who's not too high on himself either. Try as he might to put a facade, he cannot escape his team noticing his lack of self-worth in comparison to them. Van cares more for his part-timers because he sees himself in them, with the potential to be more than he ever was. Van, with all the mentoring and care he gives, is a hypocrite in the end. He'll help you in a way that he won't ever try to give to himself because he's afraid. He's afraid of being cared for and of the connections he makes through others, because he knows that at the end of the line, his life is over once it's time to make do with his karma and demon. His fate and happiness is forever controlled by it, effectively making him a hypocrite to what he says to Aaron at the end of Chapter 2 in Daybreak.
Letting destiny and that bastard sweep you along is the easy way out! You're just running away! What happened to proving that you belong here? I guess you just don't have what it takes! Do ya?
Van sacrifices his happiness, his freedom, his connections, all for the sake of keeping them safe, even though he wishes to keep a hold of them, because he loves them. Van is someone who believes that his karma is to sacrifice himself for the sake of his loved ones. It doesn't matter if they hate him or despise him. If it means keeping them safe and able to live happy lives after, then he'd see it as worth it, if it means only sacrificing someone like himself.
I can't destroy this thing, but I can seal it away in the boundary between here and the beyond. It'll at least keep it at bay for a few centuries. That's the best I can do to protect your futures. So leave me be. This is the choice that I've made.
Which is why his whole plan is flipped on its head by those very same part-timers he's been helping in his journey. He could try to push them away or even avoid them, but in the end, they'll always chase after him, because he's not just their boss, but a mentor and a friend. Someone they care for, someone that Van can't understand why they take that risk for. But after all that, their youthful charm and speech gives him the strength to reject his own destiny. Van is a character that's built his life around sacrifice and knowing where his life will culminate at the end. It's only through the connections he's made that he's able to break out of such a cycle, because his karma isn't one to punish him, but to show him that he deserves to be cared for as well.
Why?
You have actively forged many bonds throughout this year. I'm afraid this is simply karma at work. Don't think you can run away from them so easily, young man.
Master. Master, I... 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 I
We're going to accept responsibility for our past, the actions that created you. And by doing so, we'll rise to even greater heights.
From Joshua, Kevin, KeA, Crow, Rean, C, and then to Van himself. All these characters sacrifice parts of themselves or even their entirety in the narrative. All wonderfully written characters that demonstrate how Trails depicts and also utilizes the idea of self-sacrifice and sacrifice itself to lead into healing. How all these characters at the end of their journeys learn to find family or help themselves. Trails is a wonderful series, and I believe this concept of sacrifice being the starting point for these characters to lead into healing and developing is truly beautiful. Their development isn't just about the starting and end point, but about characters learning to love themselves, either from friends, family, or even from second chances.
Always remember this, Van. One's journey through life proceeds down a path of endless possibilities. Your path belongs only to you. But that doesn't mean you must walk it alone. The paths of those around you will cross, intertwine, and run alongside your own. This is a fundamental truth of the world, so it does me proud to see you finally understand it.
Sorry for being such a slow learner.
Man.
I believe it'd do us all well to remember those words.
No kidding.